Today, I'm going to be handing the host spot to somebody that has spent a lifetime in branding. Well, it seems like a lifetime, does it, Ewen? About how he approaches branding. Before I do, what's everybody's impression of branding? Have you looked at your own business from a branding point of view? Have you looked at the way you brand yourself as a personality? I mean, what do we all think that branding is? Chris?
Well, I've literally just gone through this exercise and rebranded myself as a business or as with something that reflects my momentum. It's a very interesting exercise to go through. What I hope from it is that people get the same message that I want to deliver to them, which is essentially I'm here for all the things that they need when it comes to their physical health and their mental health, hopefully. But it's a difficult exercise to do from a blank canvas. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, I haven't shown anyone my my branding yet. We're still about a week away from finishing, or Andrew's probably a week away from finishing the website, but we're very close now. So hopefully you'll all get to see it in about a week's time. So I think it looks nice. Yeah.
Well, that would be good. We'll weave that into the next session on branding. I know we've got some branding photographers on here. What's your perception of branding, Nick?
I think if I look at my own business, I try and distill it down to my behaviors. So I think if I write about something in a blog or in an email marketing or any kind of content, or if I'm talking to someone, if I then meet them in the real world and I work with them, what they see when they meet me should be consistent with what I've shared with them before. So it's about a consistency of messaging, I think, and showing up and actually doing what you say you're going to do rather than just acting it. Yeah. So that people actually believe in the brand. And then they're more likely, I think, to build trust around that, and they're more likely to share what you do with other people because they actually have some kind of confidence in what you say. So I think that if I distill it down, that's how I would kind of apply it to my business in a simple way. And if I'm working with a client, I try and encourage them to show themselves in a way that's consistent with their brand. And obviously they've got to understand what their brand is to them. And it's completely different for different people. So there's no one size fits all. It's helping them understand who they are, what they're about, what their message is. And from a photographer point of view, bringing that to life visually, and as Anne-Marie's shown, is taking them on a journey and showing the story, so that people can buy into what you're doing, what your service is, what your product is. Yeah. And it's, as you say, Paul, it's then encouraging people to lean into you, isn't it, through that messaging. So I'm sure we can look at branding in lots of different ways, but that's how I tend to look at it from a smaller business perspective.
I must admit, when I came away from working in corporate and Weller, I mean, I knew when I was in the role of marketing manager, you have to protect the brand. I mean, anything that was printed, it had to go past different signatures to make sure nobody was tweaking with it, So I'm meticulous about that. But Anne-Marie, you've got a point.
Well, I was just going to say, this is going to be really interesting for me because I think I'm confused about brand, as in what a brand is, because to me, a brand is the Nike tick, so that as soon as I see that anywhere, I know that that's a Nike product. So for me, my brand is my little lock, unlocking your book thing, and making sure that I have the same logo, blah, 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 everywhere. But listening to obviously what other people have just said, I think I might be looking at it in the wrong way. So this is going to be really interesting.
Well,
don't let me down, Ewan.
What you just said there is very, very relevant because when I came away from corporate, I've produced different, I've had a go at different projects and things. In fact, the first company I started was brand performance. I was helping the performance of different brands. I didn't even have a logo for that. And a lot of people I talk to, when it comes to branding, they think of a logo, and they'll knock up a few logos and think, oh, I like that one, and they'll go with that. and they'll get business, but branding is much bigger than that. Marcus?
If I may quote Jeff Bezos, he says very succinctly that a brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room.
Absolutely.
So it's an impression. And yes, a logo is part of it, a strap line is part of it. It's all these things coming together. But it's a rather nebulous impression.
Gosh, I'm in trouble then.
Well,
it could be. I also heard
it. Brand, but you can have a bad brand as well, or a good brand. It doesn't necessarily mean it's, you know, you can have both.
Sorry, what are you
AKA
saying?
Gerald Ratner. If you think of the damage that Gerald Ratner did with his brand when he called it a pile of crap.
Yeah.
I heard his brand overnight.
I think we look at the big brands, the Apple logo, that says something straight away. You get a feeling about it, don't you? You get the sense of identity with it. Now, some people just see it as something else. I see it as something different because I've been a fan of Apple since 1990. Reebok is another one. Apparently most Reebok shoes, not Reebok, Adidas, Nike shoes, there you go. Nike shoes are bought by men over 50 that don't do any exercise. So it's what does it say about you? And is it a logo? So it says something instantly. Is it more than that? I heard not some time ago that as individuals, do we need a brand? And we're not as big as the big companies. Do we need a brand? Somebody once said to me that a brand, or I read somewhere, a brand is your reputation. Brand is all about your reputation. Somebody hears your name. What is that a reputation that's wrapped around that name? Mel?
Yeah, I'm very brand loyal. I don't know if you can see it, what I'm wearing today. I'm very conscious that, you know, the quality of the products, and I wear a lot of Ralph Lauren stuff, and I've done for years and years. And I think that's where, you know, my brand loyalty lies on sort of clothes.
Well, it's interesting that you should say that, because also you've got brands. When I was a big ice cream fan, I was a big fan of Ben and Jerry's, but they've got very political, you know. So is the more that's nothing to do with the logo. Man, they've been taken over by Unilever, so maybe they're not quite the same. I prefer Somerset ice creams. Ollie?
Yeah, I was talking about sort of branding. I think with consistency is definitely it, and the promises a brand makes and kind of keeping consistent with them. And I was reading this morning about there's a craft brewery called Brewdog, and they've been in a lot of kind of in the news in and out a lot recently, and they made this promise to be this carbon neutral, kind of really environmentally friendly brewery. But then today it was on Twitter that they partnered with this urban garden project, and they've literally put astroturf and fake plastic plants everywhere. And so it's just not consistent with the brand which they've been trying to portray. And yeah, that for me kind of illustrates how, yeah, it's more than just a logo or their name. It's what they do and yeah, how they're perceived by other people.
Which again is to do with your reputation. So, you know, as an individual, you've got to think, what am I portraying? What is my reputation? And of course, Brewdog have been in trouble because of the way they were treating their staff. So all of a sudden it's all going, out of kilter. I'm now I've got some impressions there. I'm now going to hand over to Ewan. And want me to share screen straight away?
Yeah. So, morning, everybody. Before, I just wanted to, I think there's some interesting comments that you've already made, and I've made some notes. So Nick said about branding, it's all encompassing, it's about trust, understanding who they are and what they are about. Ollie's just talked about consistency. I think from my point of view, that's absolutely all true, completely true. What I want to take you through is how some of the bigger brands get to where they've got to. And this is based on a model that I know is used variously by different companies. And it's something that I've adapted over time. you will see it in other places, but I just wanted to take you, and this is based on experience about how I was involved in the original Orange brand. I've been involved in smaller brands, a couple of charities in London, which I've set up, one called Norwood Ravenswood. So I've done some branding from a corporate point of view, but I've also done it from a personal point of view. I'm not, I don't want to set myself up as a branding expert. I am a jack of all trades, but it's something that I've done. So I wanted to just take you through the approach and hopefully give you an idea of where a brand comes from. Because Anne-Marie's point about the Nike Tick logo, and that's what she sees as a brand, is actually true. But what you don't see is everything that comes underneath that makes her see that. And that's by some of the things that we've mentioned, how a brand reacts, how it treats other people, how its consistency. Brewdog at the moment is under a lot of fire, and it's a common thing. When a company starts small and builds a brand, it's easy. When it starts to have more and more reaches to outlet, it becomes more difficult to control that brand because the people invested in it don't go back to the heart of what was done at the start. So what I'm going to try and quickly take you through is talk you through the process, but also there's a neat little method or something that you can all use if you want to afterwards. So if you can flip it over, Paul, to the first slide. Oh, it's going to build. Okay, so I'll do it as the build. I didn't know if it was going to build. So when I do branding, we go through a briefing process. We have a creative brief that we use. And I'll talk through this presentation along the lines of one that we've just done as part of funeral marketing for a new funeral brand. So Richard Kerrison, who's been on this call, came down to meet us, and we had a 2-hour session. And Kelly and I, the idea of what we wanted to get out of him was everything about him that would come through in his brand. And the way we do that is we build it from the bottom up. So we go through a series of questions that's written down in a brief. And firstly, what we want to do is understand, and as you'll see, this diagram will build. So the foundation of every brand is built on what you do. You have to do something. Everyone does something. So that's based on your service offering. It's very basic. It's what do you do? So for Nick, you're a branding photographer. You offer these services. For Mel, your recruitment, you offer these services. If you think of that as the foundation, they need to be the solid foundations on which you build your brand. It's quite easy. You just put them down. If you can click again, Paul, it'll build into the next. The next is about the capabilities and skills. So what we're trying to uncover is okay, so this is what you do, but what are your capabilities, your skills? What are your USPs within those areas? What are the things that you might do that are differently? And these I like to think of as the pillars. These are the pillars which come off the foundations. So through that briefing process, we try and uncover. So for Richard Kerrison, I'll go and I'll show you what we built for his version of this in a minute. The next part we uncover, if you click again, which builds on this again, is what are your beliefs and values? And this is where a brand starts to form. It's all very well. Everyone has a service offering. Everyone has, then you have USPs, which are something that makes you different. But then it's your beliefs and values, which start to encompass and bring out something. Now that might be your, let's take Brewdog as an example. Theirs was to be carbon neutral. Their mission statement would probably have something in that. And a mission statement can be a vision statement. It can be whatever it's named, can then start to build that and tell people, what are you trying to achieve? You're not saying, I'm a photographer and I take photos. What you're saying is, I'm a photographer who believes that I take photos and I believe that carbon neutrality is important to me, and everything I do is enshrined in that thought process. Mm-hmm. And then once you've built that, then you have the roof that sits on top of that. And the roof that sits on top of that, if you could click, Paul, is basically I've said brand, it's actually your logo and your strap line. And through a briefing process, you can actually, through the questions that we ask, we can uncover these things, because the first three, what you do, cultivate capabilities and skills, beliefs and values, can then lead to what's called a creative proposition. And a creative proposition is then what can produce a brand and a strap line. And if you think about certain brands, and I used to do this all the time, I used to look at brands and I used to try and work this backwards. You can see that one of the things that Ollie mentioned was about consistency. If you have something in here that is inconsistent in your message, so say one of your, for example, let's say about them treating their staff badly, and why you choose as credentials or something is part of that brand, part of this building, if you like. If you knock that out, you can then see that it starts to go off kilter, and you can see how the brand can then start to fall. So a brand to me is all of these things. It's not just the brand and the strapline that sits on top. It's what you do, your capabilities and skills, and your beliefs and values. And a lot of organizations will use a version of this, something like this, as they might have it even in their corporate literature about the pillars upon which their business sits. The key is how to get this through. And as I say, there's a brief that we use, which again is a form of a brief that I've used for many years that helps you try and understand and try and get these things out. But when you actually go through it, if you go through, what do I do? What are my capabilities and skills? What are my beliefs and values? You can then, it's an iterative process that allows you to sort of condense everything into that top line. So giving an example of something we've just done, what I want to do, I'm very mindful of the excellent presentation that Nick and Anne-Marie gave a few weeks ago. And rather than talking at people, what I'm going to do is go through and explain a brand that we've just done and then show 3 options. I think if we've got that, have we, Paul? Have we got the 3 options at the end?
I might need to come out and back in again.
Yeah, that's fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the explanation of how we went through the process with Richard using this brand structure, and give you and show you then. So to put this in context, what we usually do is the first 3, what you do, capability, skills, belief and values, and the vision identity, that usually then leads to a creative brief for the production of a logo. So what we'll do then is we'll then share the 3 options that our designer came back with, and we can all have a discussion about what we think. And I can guarantee everyone will have a different point of view, because that's the other thing. This is when you're in person, this is very personal to you. And as long as you believe everything in here, that's really what matters. And as Nick said, he's very conscious about when he goes out that he tries to act the way that he sees his brand. That's absolutely correct, because it's his brand. If someone looks at it and doesn't like it, that's fine. What's important is that Nick believes in his own brand and what he's doing, because you cannot be all things to all people, as we said in a number of these calls. So if we flick to the next slide. So this is for, and flick again, this is for Derham and Fakenham Funeral Services. So as I said, I'll give a bit of background. Richard Kerrison, he has set up he wants to set up a new funeral business. He wants to do something different. He lives in Norfolk, and so he came down and we went through a briefing process with him to try and uncover some very specific things about him. And before I go into what we put into the brand structure, I'll tell you some of the key things that came across, because it's very pertinent to the end to showing the logo designs. Richard wants to do things slightly differently. He lives in Norfolk. He's setting up in Derham and Fakenham, which is quite a traditional area. So he wanted something that was founded within the local area, but showed it to be slightly different. Richard is very outgoing. He's certainly not a man in black who delivers funerals. One of the things we uncovered was what his favorite color scheme is, and he likes baby blue, yellow, and pink. So very unfuneral colors. So that's a bit of a challenge. But he wants to offer very good value to people who need the services. And he also wants to offer something that's family-based, that's warm. I did a briefing with him a couple of weeks ago to talk through a couple of things. And the one thing that he wanted to come through was warmth. He wanted people, when they come and see him, when they interact with him, to feel that they were getting warmth from him. So if we turn that into, so we uncovered that in a 2-hour conversation. They're the sort of key points. Kelly and I then went away, and then we started to build this into this brand building, if you like, to then be able to go to Emma and basically turn this into something that's visual, which is the job that a designer does to do that. I have absolute respect for, because I couldn't do it. But it's like the classic saying that I know Barry, who used to be on his calls, used to say, rubbish in, rubbish out. We try and make sure that the quality comes in, and that only goes through by understanding these things. So for Richard's one, what does he do? Pure cremations, simple send-offs, traditional funerals, bespoke funerals, nothing different really to that's what funeral directors do. If you click again, we then come into what did he believe his capabilities and skills would be, and some of his USPs. So local business, local family-run business, it's the personal touch. I'm going to have to move something because I can't see the end. Flexible approach, delivering the funeral your way. So it's not like some of the bigger funeral directors, which which tell you what they want to deliver to you rather than what you want to deliver to them. And I want to nod a hat to Rod, because this is all based on Rod's business model as well. Appropriate, correct advice giving, getting the value from your service, empathetic and supportive. We make things easy for you. So that's the core capabilities and skills, but you can already start to see there's some slight things that are coming out that are a bit different in there. Your way, value from the service, we make things easy for you. If you can click again, Paul. We then produced this from the conversations we had. We then had to start to throw it out a little bit and start to put this into a bit more of a sense of a brand in terms of brand beliefs, the values. So we came up with, we take the problem away from our customers. We pride ourselves on providing high quality customer service, offering appropriate advice and tailoring the funeral service to suit their emotional requirements as well as their financial needs. High quality, high value. So again, from the base, which is very vanilla in terms of what we offer, we're starting to produce something that's a little bit, hopefully is a little bit more personal. It's a little bit more personal to Richard and what he wants his business to be. Then if we cap it off, we then distill this right down into a creative proposition, which also then has become the strapline. It doesn't always become the strapline. So a lot of straplines you see, and straplines are usually the words that accompany a logo or a visual indices. They don't always become the strapline. Sometimes the creative proposition might be different. In this case, it was the same. So we had remembered in style, because what we felt was the idea of remembering and style came across what was enshrined in the values and the skills, but also what Richard wanted to happen, the idea of being style, not only style in terms of his style, but when you do anything, be it even the most basic service, it will be done with that thought and that value and that style in mind. And what will sit on top of that will be the visual execution of whatever these things are. But you can see there that we've built a brand from the bottom up. Now the brand doesn't exist yet, but hopefully in time the brand will exist. And whatever Richard does, this will have to come back to these things and think on these things that basically prop up the brand. And it's just that creative execution that will sit on top. So we went away after this. So we produced the brief and this formed a creative brief that we were able to give out to our designer who we used, Design for Pi down in Exeter. And Emma came back with 3 concepts. So I'm going to show you the concepts. I don't quite know what Paul's going to show you, but I'll show you the concepts and I'll explain the 3 concepts and how they came back to the brief, depending on what Paul's got. If Paul's got the full logo presentation, then I can go through it quickly. If it's just the logo, then I can explain it.
Just tell me whether you can see that.
No, it's frozen again.
Frozen at mine, Paul.
Right, so go back out.
Actually, before we do, Paul,
Yeah.
has anybody got any question? Did that make any sense? Does that, especially for Anne-Marie, because I know you're the one that's probably, you said beforehand that brand was possibly something that you're now rethinking and don't really know. Does that make sense? Does that help give a little bit of context to a logo?
Yeah, I think it's like everything, isn't it? It's actually not that complicated, and I'm not trying to take away from what you've done,
No,
but
it's not.
the way you've explained it is actually like, oh yeah, it's really actually quite simple. But in my mind, it's like this massive problem, and clearly it doesn't need to be. And I think for me personally, just what you've said there, I've definitely put the roof on, but I've forgotten about the rest of it.
Oh, dear.
So my roof is kind of floating at the moment.
Yeah, but I would guess you haven't. The thing is, it's all in your mind. So
Yeah, maybe.
you know, what there is, what I have got, and what Paul will be able to give out later, or I can send out later, is I've actually got that brief, and you'll see the questions in it are really simple, and might be a thing just to ask yourself the questions, and just sit down and just and pose yourself the questions, because then you can build the building. But it'll already be in your mind. You've just gone through that process because you've done it. You know, you've done it within yourself. The reason we do this is because we're doing it from I don't know you, so I'd have to go through this process to understand you, but you understand you, if that makes sense.
I'm not convinced I do, but thank you for your confidence in me.
I've got
Sorry, Chris.
Chris, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Nick was before me, but
Oh, don't worry.
Sorry, Nick.
I just want to say the funny thing for me is that a couple of times Andrew's been asking me for information, and one thing in particular we mentioned is a strap line, and I've realised, of course, that that's the other thing I should have got from Mike before he fitted off. So I still haven't got a strap line.
I think, yeah, I mean, I've seen, obviously, I know from what you've been doing, and I think this is the distinction between the logo is great, but going through the process of producing a brand is a slightly different thing, where these things might come out. Now, you can retrospectively do it because a logo is just a creative execution, but
yeah,
you know, it's something that you can work on. Nick?
You know, I thought that was a really, as Anne-Marie said, it's a very simple way of explaining a really complicated concept. And I think, Anne-Marie, I think the beauty of it is that if, say, you come up with a creative idea and you're thinking of going off in a different direction, that process that Ewan's described, it just helps you think, am I on brand, or is that taking me off brand? And it just keeps you kind of focused on the core business without getting distracted. Or it keeps you focused on your values and your vision. But I thought that was such a simple way of explaining it, Ewan. Thank you.
Andrew?
Yeah, just a quick one, just to pick up really on what Nick said about are you on brand? I think actually, because we all know, as you rightly say, in our heads what we represent, what our values are, but it's a very useful exercise to now and again come back to that. I mean, if you actually go through the way you've laid out, though, Ewan, is so good that I think it would be a brilliant exercise for everybody on this call, no matter what their experience, to run through that with their own brand in mind. And then I think you're going to see where there might be some gaps. I think I definitely would. And then you can think, oh, okay, I need to do this. And I think it's a great thing, a sort of touch point, if you like, you can keep referring back to. A bit like when you do get a creative brief, you will go off on a tangent, potentially. You look at a brief, you go and start designing. Sometimes you'll go down rabbit holes. You'll come back to that brief and then, right, okay, push you back on track. So very similar to that sort of thing. So yeah, really, really interesting.
Yeah, and the one thing that everyone can have is, again, that diagram, that building diagram, the basic one with how it's formed. That, again, there's a copy of that everyone can have if they want it. Again, if you look across the internet, you'll see various different versions of it. So it's something that, you know, exists, but this is just one that I've adapted. Paul, sorry.
Yeah, no. Those downloads will be available as soon as I've got this edited. On the site, and for Anne-Marie's, to paint the picture again, I suppose you return to this if you decide the roof is leaking. However, I've written one thing that I wrote in a sentence down that really jumped out at me from your explanation, Ewan, is that we know we are all more than what we do, aren't we? You know, how many times before have I said you're not, people don't buy what you do, they buy what you're left with. So if all you are is what you do, you're like everybody else. And if everybody else is just doing that, you're going to go and start competing on price. So if you've got your brand values right and you show through your branding that you are much more than what you do, not only will you attract the right clients, but you'll also attract higher paying clients. Anne-Marie, back to you, Ewan, but Anne-Marie.
Yes, it's a really quick point, just building on what Andrew said. Would it be a worthwhile exercise to actually do that on each other? So what we perceive each other's brands to be. So, because obviously when you're doing it yourself, you think you're portraying stuff that you potentially aren't.
Well, I think that could be a good breakout session, depending on how much more, depending on where this section naturally ends and the questions. I think it could be a good breakout session, that, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, I think definitely it can be quite a long process, because I think that's sometimes, especially when the services is not difficult. When you get to the core capabilities and then the beliefs, that can be a bit more, that can take a bit more thought and a bit more time, but it's certainly something worth trying. I think throughout this process, as Anne-Marie said, and thank you for your comments, it's actually a very simple process. For me, the art and the skill comes in the next bit, which is, how do you then convert those simple things into something which you expect, or you want someone to try and get that, what you are, in one visual look? And we're lucky enough to work with a fantastic designer who presents back, the way she presents back brand is better than some of the biggest agencies I've worked with. And I'm lucky to have worked in some of the biggest advertising agencies in the world. And what she comes back with is equally as good as what I've seen happen from some of the biggest creative teams that I've worked with. So we'll go through now. So what I want to do is then show how this has been turned into a logo. And there's 3 different concepts. There's no right or wrong answer. It all comes down to, if I could show you the brief, we could come back to the brief. What I'll do is, beforehand, remember these points about the brief. Richard Kerrison is outgoing. He wants to do something that's slightly differently, but very importantly, he works in an area that is founded in the local economy. So it has to have an anchor back to Norwich and Norfolk, and something in Norfolk. He wants to get his personality across. So the use of color is important, and it's important, again, not to appear like Co-op or Dignity or some of the other funeral brands, but remember, this is the funeral brand. So Paul, if you can bring up, and depending on what we've gone, I can quickly whip you through how the creative presentation was given back to us.
I'm actually going to share the creative results that came back to Richard, and so they're in no particular order, and it'd be interesting for you to make a note of what you feel or
about each one. Yeah. So hopefully you can see that. Yeah. Can everyone see it?
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
So key logo design attributes: confident, independent, stylish and bright, trusted and genuine, classic and iconic, grounded yet rule breaking. That's the local area part. Open-minded and fair. So the first concept was called Swallowtail, and just keep moving down. So the swallowtail butterfly is the UK's largest and rarest butterfly, and is only found on the Norfolk Broads. The swallowtail butterflies are large, and then don't need to go into that. But if we go down to the next, we then have what's a mood board, and the mood board tries to get across exactly as it says, the mood of the brand. What is the mood of the brand? To me, this is it. There's some black in there, but there's yellow in there. It shows the butterfly. It comes across as bright, but not. It's not.
Stylish.
It's not overly bright.
It's stylish, isn't it?
Yeah, and then if we go down, we then come to. This was the first logo, Derriman Faken and Funeral Services, and if you go back to the colours. So these were the key points that Emma came across. So contrasting colours. In colour psychology, black can mean symbolic of mystery, power, elegance, and sophistication. The colour meaning for yellow revolves around sunshine. It evokes feelings of happiness, positivity, and optimism. Historically symbolic. The dark and detailed patterns on the swallowtail's wings have similar characteristics to historically stained glass windows, often found in a church. The handwritten font in graphology, the study of handwriting, handwritten fonts slanting to the right suggests that we are open to the new experience and to enjoy meeting new people. And then the use of a sans serif font gives off a feeling of being casual, informal, friendly, and very approachable. And taking it back to the brief, to Richard, those primary colours are exactly what he thought was he thought represented him, the yellows, the pinks, and the blues, but trying to project in something that is reflective of the local area, but is also not inappropriate for a funeral brand, in our view. And then we can zip through. This is how the brand would be produced in different areas. If you keep going down, primary colours, yeah. And then we'll just get to, if we just get to where, keep moving, this is again how it's represented. If we keep going, now this is quite interesting. So this is a competitive analysis. So the other brands in the bottom are the different brands within the area. And then this is how his would sit. So you can see it's different, but it's not, I don't think it sits apart in terms of, it's not saying, well, that's a funeral brand, what's that doing there? It sits apart because of its colour usage. The others are quite grey, there's some blues, there's some greys. So there is an element of standout there, I think. And then we'll just show quickly then how the web design will start to turn out. And again, when we get to a web design, we can see that what we're trying to do is get across clarity in terms of how we might use it, but again, using the colours in a way that is friendly and open. So that was Swallowtail. Very different to what you might see from other funeral brands, I think. The second concept was Poppy. Now, this one had my heart beating a million miles an hour, hoping he would never choose it, because the difficulty around this is enormous, but we went ahead with it, hoping that he wouldn't choose it. And at one point I thought he was going to, obviously because of the Poppy appeal. But the Norfolk coast between Sheringham, Cromer and Overstrand is known as Poppyland, a name first given to this area by the writer Clement Scott in the 1800s. Today, the common poppy is noted as the county flower of Norfolk, which was part of the reason. It was actually something Richard mentioned himself, that he knew that the county flower was a poppy. So the mood board here is very different. It focuses on pinks and reds, which, you know, yes, the poppy has a connotation, but you could argue that pinks and reds could be quite aggressive colours, I suppose. But we got it in because as much he had mentioned. So this is very, very different. And I know that Paul had a comment when we saw this, is that the little leaf falling off felt a little bit like a teardrop, which was something that he liked. So this is very different. This is a bit more modern, but it uses the poppy. And again, depicting transparency, the use of maroon red and soft pinks intends to create translucent feel of the petals, a subtle nod to the transparent way Durham, Fakenham funeral services provide their services. Spectrum of reds. Red and maroon are often used to represent confidence, creative thoughts, excitement, power, risk, passion. Pink is intuitive and insightful, showing tenderness and kindness in its empathy and sensitivity. In colour psychology, pink is a sign of hope. Contemporary vector signals, simple and contemporary vector drawing of a delicate poppy, focusing on the side of a poppy and the layers of petals rather than the center of a poppy, all too commonly used. Traditional sans serif font, a new font yet traditional in its style. The use of color and sideways text gives a nod to popular vintage slides, advertising and prints. Again, so it's very different, focusing on the red. If we go down to the competitive review, Paul. Yeah, again, this is the same. This is how it would sit. Again, you can see there's an element. If you mix those up, there would be an element of standout. Gowards has a similar thing with the use of, I think it's dandelion, but obviously the colorways are slightly different. And then if we move down into the web design would be more use of white space. In my mind, as I say, when we were presenting this, there were a number of things that I was concerned about. I'd still presented it, but I was going to try and angle him away from it. The use of remembered in style with the use of a poppy may have been protected by the poppy appeal. So we may have had some issues there. But once everyone feeds back, I'll give you the feedback that we got, and it's quite interesting to see if anyone else has the same feedback. And then we go on to concept 3, which is kingfisher. So a good place to look for kingfishers on the Norfolk Broads. So kingfishers are noted for being in the Broads. This, if we go down, is much more focusing on the blues, and the mood board is much more in the sort of the blue hue, rather than we've got sort of gone from yellow and black through pinks and reds, and this is much more in hues of blue. And then if we go to the logo, focusing on the kingfisher, this was Derham Fakenham Funeral Services with the use of the kingfisher in the middle, which I loved personally. And then if we explain again, go through the explanation of why this logo. So the bright color palette, blue is said to promote feelings of tranquility. Dark blue suggests security, quality, personal wisdom, and serenity. Bright blue expresses cleanliness, strength, and dependability. To balance, the use of bright yellow aims to evoke feelings of cheerfulness and warmth. The artisanal icon, this painted sketch style icon creates a free and organic atmosphere. The brush strokes suggest dedication to a craft and are indicative of the human personal touch. And again, we've used a sans serif font for the same reasons, slightly decorative, slant on the classic and traditional sans serif font, expressing both a sense of authority and elegance. And if we go through again, go down to the competitive palette. I think it's a little way down. Again, you can see there's a certain level of standout, but you can see how it sits within the competitive scope within the area. And then if we go to the web design, it'll just shows a web concept. So again, it's very different. It's colorful use of white space with the blues, but a very similar kind of set, but it's much more in the blue area. And they were the 3 concepts. So they were what came back from, if we go back to the diagram that I showed, we went through that process of understanding Nick, and the magic is then turning what we did into what was presented. So the 3 concepts, I would be interested to get any feedback on, if you were Richard, and obviously you're not Richard, but if you were Richard and thinking about the things that I said about who he is, and i.e. who you are, what would be your comments, and which one would you either think I like or I don't like, or any of them don't you like? Because there is no right answer. Rebecca.
Definitely the last one. I thought that was lovely because it immediately, I don't know, instantly it made me almost smile. And the idea of a kingfisher sitting on a tranquil pool and just peace, but there's this little bit of life there. I think that's really nice. But I don't know if that would totally suit him, although I think a kingfisher is quite flashy in a way, aren't they? But you've really muted the colours there. But I think the blue's lovely. I think that would attract me as a customer.
Richard's quite flashy.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking. But then the colours you've used for the kingfisher aren't flashy as such. But I think that's nice. Whereas the poppy, no way. And what was the first one again? The yeah, but I liked the idea, but I don't like the black and the thingy, the orange.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. That's valid comments, absolutely valid. There's no wrong answer. There is no wrong answer.
What an incredible process. Where do I sign up? But moving on from that. Kingfisher, I've put 2 massive ticks next to because I absolutely love the Norfolk Broads. If I could have a house on the Norfolk Broads, I would be a very happy person. And obviously, yes, you see the kingfisher. So that was the only one for me personally that I got the Norfolk reference. I didn't know that the swallowtail was the Norfolk butterfly, and I didn't know that the poppy was the county flower. That's not necessarily relevant because I don't live in Norfolk, so I'm not necessarily going to use their services. But as an outsider, neither of those spoke to me. The poppy I didn't like at all. The only other thing I wanted to say about the swallowtail, it made me think of flying free, which is obviously a journey that we hope we go on when we get to that point. So there was something in that one as well.
Thank you.
I think Nathan was next, wasn't he?
Yeah, Nathan.
Yeah, really great work, Ewan. That's amazing. I'm going to disagree with the past two people, but I guess that's what makes this fun. Is I think hands down the butterfly was the best one. I like the colourful bits of it, and kind of touching on what Anne-Marie said there as well. There's sort of overtones of kind of reincarnation and sort of, you know, rebirth, because obviously that's what a butterfly goes through on its little journey. And also think, if you didn't know the history of the butterfly in the area, maybe it's something that people would ask about when they're making their inquiries. So it's kind of an easy icebreaker there. That's
Oh, you're frozen, Nathan.
so yeah, I personally would have gone with the butterfly there.
Thank you. Martin, I'm interested from your point of view, Martin, obviously as another designer.
Yeah, I'm probably the same as Nathan. I thought there was a lot of depth in the ideas behind the butterfly. You know, talking about stained glass windows, I think sort of kind of like, you know, death isn't the end or whatever. You know, there's a lot of, you could read so much into it, but I liked the style of the Kingfisher. So sort of, you know, that would be my take on it. I wasn't so keen on the script of the butterfly, but you know, the loose style of the Kingfisher and that the type was really lovely. So that would be the angle.
Yeah, so it would be interesting to see the butterfly like the Kingfisher, because I think it was that free style.
Yeah, that's what I really liked about it.
Whereas,
there was a freedom to the style of the Kingfisher.
Whereas the butterfly almost looked like it was sort of pinned there, you know, like on a black velvet thing. It almost looked a bit sort of dead.
Well, he said that fits the funeral market, doesn't it?
It is dead.
Dead butterfly.
Marcus.
Yeah,
and then I'll continue, Nick.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, excellent work on nearly all of them. Yeah, difficult to market a funeral business, isn't it? Because you've got to come across as being empathic, but at the same time, you can't be too. You got to be a bit sort of dour about it in some ways, or some people might be in a state of mind where they're not feeling that. I liked the butterfly because it sort of reminded me a little bit of Richard in his yellow waistcoat there, and I thought that was sort of resonated with that. Interesting that nobody actually shows a coffin, which I suppose you can't, or you can't really show the product. And yeah, so it's the butterfly for me.
There was some products there. They had the canisters that you put the ashes in as one of the iconic things that was pitched up on the branding guidelines pages, and I thought that was actually quite a nice way of displaying what it would look like in situ.
Yeah, interesting that they're all quite fleeting. All the butterfly, the poppy, and the kingfish. They don't last very long, do they? They all sort of quite here and here. You know, here.
That's interesting that you would take that from it. It has been mentioned. It has been mentioned before, in passing, but it's an interesting point to take from it.
Because when you think of graveyards, you think of trees that you're growing and things that are very longevity, or something that's had a major
dignity. I think, yeah.
Do you think we can overthink this? Of course,
yes.
Because yes. I would say, well, life is fleeting. You know, so and I must admit, when it's only today that I've seen the stained glass image of the butterfly, and of course the black is normally associated. Remember, also Richard wants to stand out from the competitors he wants to do things slightly different. He does not want to. I mean, with Richard's, I'll ask Richard's permission, but I'm quite happy to put that document up on the membership site as well, so that you can go back over it.
Nick, I think Nick had a comment.
Yeah, I thought what was whichever one you like, the process is great, isn't it? Because it pushes you, it's polarizing, it pushes you in different directions, and it makes you question where you sit relative to those polarizing positions. But for me personally, I thought the butterfly, I kind of leant in towards the butterfly. I thought the blues and the kingfisher are quite cold, and I don't really want to associate death with cold, whereas warmth gives me more of a comforting feeling. And I think it just feels softer and it feels warmer. I think the color tones in the butterfly, and I think, as Marcus said, that kind of delicacy of the butterfly flying away, it's kind of like a release. So I think that worked for me on lots of levels. And the poppy, absolutely no.
And then I just want to, as a last comment, before I go back and tell and explain what actually the upshot and the comments that we got back, is just to ask Rod what you think about branding in the funeral sector and about that sort of thing, because you're obviously working in it.
Well, I mean, when I look back at my own swans, my swans with the with the logo, if you like, and the professional focus service driven was my strapline. Although my strapline has changed, it's gone from several different ones, and now I'm focusing in on making funerals less of an undertaking. So trying to use a play on words as a strapline. I'm trying to portray a corporate image with a non-fragmented approach.
Oh.
So when you look at my vehicles, when you look at my appearance on a funeral day, or when I come and see you, it's going to be a very relaxed session when I come and see you. But on the funeral, oh no, it's going to be like that, serious. Because, at the end of the day, we've got to pay the respect for the person that's just passed over. We're actually not delivering a funeral, we're delivering a celebration of hopefully a long life. So all those things have got to be brought in. But when you're going to see a client and they're obviously in mourning, I'm going to see one less than an hour or an hour or so. And, he just lost his wife. She had cancer. She died suddenly. She had a 3-week notice. It was awful. And but I can't grieve for him. I can only empathize with him. I'm there to do my job. So I should do my job to the best of my ability. I'll keep in touch with him. He'll have a great send-off for his wife. He'll have exactly what he wants. We'll over-deliver on that. The unique thing for us is that we're able to do it as a one-person trip. So my team's so tight around me, you don't realize they're even there. We're stealth-like. Whereas with some of the bigger organizations, it's a disorganized, disjointed, fragmented. It's almost a difficult job for them to do. They haven't got what I've got. And so consequently, I'm very happy and pleased in the position that I'm in. And so you can organize something great and get across those unique USPs.
You've just gone through that entire diagram in one monologue.
Sorry.
You've just got no. It's a good thing. You've just explained your brand. You've explained all elements of the brand in just what you've said, and I know your logo, so I can picture the swan logo
with the two swans with the heart shape in the middle. Yeah. I mean, that was meant to happen, obviously.
Exactly. But you've just ensued your brand by talking about what you do and how you're different and your beliefs and your mission and everything. You've done that in one statement, so you know what your brand is. And it's fine to change your strapline every now and again. That's fine, because that's not the brand.
No.
All the strap lines that you've used are they have a similar thought process to them.
That thinking outside of the box, that one is such a good one, was it really?
So I will quickly take you back through the comments that we got back and what was chosen. If you can bring it up again, Paul, quickly, and I'll just whisk through them. Just
for what it's worth, and I chose the poppy one because of the tier bit. I was locked onto that. Didn't have these conversations. And I guess when you're looking at your own brand, you'll start to question it. And the more people you talk to, the more if you're a Librian, you've got no chance it'll never get launched. So
didn't quite happen what I thought would happen. I thought we would get everyone chosen, because this is what happens in a brand. This is why I say to someone, you have to make the decision. Don't share it with too many people. But it didn't quite happen because everyone agreed on the something. So my personal choice was the Kingfisher, because I just thought for exactly some of the same things that people said about the free, the free spirit, the nature of it. That's what happened. The one that Richard chose.
Sorry, you. Where do you want me to go? Shall I start?
Just start with the logo at Swallowtail, just at the top of Swallowtail.
All right. I'm not sure what I'm doing.
Sorry. Yeah, just there.
Right.
So the one that Richard chose was Swallowtail because of lots of the things that you've said, but I think, and it was a while back, so I have to go back through my memory, but I think the colours portrayed what he wanted to do. He liked the use of, he felt rather than the butterfly being fleeting, he thought that the butterfly reflected some of the things that Emma had said. He liked the use of the colours. He thought it could have that sort of corporate view to it but also it's warm and friendly. So that's the one he went with. The funny thing was that when we moved to the poppy, and if we moved to the website part of the poppy was the absolute no. He loved it. Now, when we actually did the presentation, Richard said, I'm going to go with poppy because I love it. But then he took it away and presented it in the pub to a few of his mates. And one of the comments that came back, which I think is really interesting, is that people felt that this was a website that had blood spattered on it. With it's actually poppy petals sort of floating nicely across to give it movement. But a lot of people felt some people felt that actually that could look like blood spattered across the website. So it's absolute, as everyone said on this call, it was an absolute no-no. And then they felt that this felt more like a lifestyle brand and possibly more like a sort of potentially more like a home design company rather than a funeral director's. But it would have been the second one. But it wasn't rejected because they felt it was wrong. It just wasn't quite where Richard wanted to be. I think it has legs, but that was where it was decided. So the upshot was Swallowtail. So we're now working on producing everything with the Swallowtail branding.
I mean, the poppy is already so iconic, isn't it, with the First World War, isn't it? I mean, and
it would have caused
in our psyche, isn't it? In the UK psyche, isn't it?
You can't really borrow it for something else, can you?
Yeah.
It's so protected. There is actually there's a funeral directors called Poppies that actually have managed to get round the protection, but it would have just been a nightmare from lots of points of view. So the best result, and it's interesting that everybody on the call just didn't like it. So I'm glad we didn't go with it,
except for Paul.
What do I know?
It did look like a tear.
So anyway, hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can take information from someone's mind and what they want to achieve and then turn it into a logo going through a branding process on the way. It's very short, but hopefully that gives you an idea of the process that also I would say if anyone ever think of branding, not doing it with us or anyone else, I always think that's a process that someone who says they'll do a brand should take you through. They should take you through a process or a version of that process, irrespective of the cost that they're doing it. Because anyone who's thinking about doing branding should go through that thought process, because otherwise you won't end up with a brand, you'll just end up with a logo type, potentially, in my view. So.
It's interesting. It starts off, with research, doesn't it? And researching the area and the identity of the area, and you build up in stages from there. It's not just a whole, this is what it is. Research is very important.
Yeah, and it makes it very easy because it makes it much of an easier process if you start from the very simple base and then you work it up. It becomes an iterative process to the point where actually, that idea of rubbish in, rubbish out, and actually producing a really good brief, which is actually, yes, it takes work to do, but if you do it that way, the brief becomes easier to do, which means for the designer, and Martin, I'm sure you can agree with this, a good brief makes it easier for you and makes you produce a better product.
Yeah, for sure. It's, you're already in the right place when you start, rather than kind of meandering off in completely the wrong direction. Yeah.
Chris has got a point.
There was two things really. One, I wanted to say that I thought that the entire exercise, because obviously we sort of looked at some of this before, was really good. I I'm excited about working with Emma, because for our phase 2, we're going to use Emma's design stuff to illustrate what I'm doing with these courses. So I'm very excited about working with her, because I think I really like the in-depthness of what she's gone through. And although I've had flashes of that with my current branding man, I don't necessarily feel like I know entirely why he's chosen those images. I gave him 25 pages worth of images of things I liked, of things that I respond to before we started this process, because I felt it was very important that he had a really good idea about what called to me. And I think he actually has done a lot of that, but I haven't understood all the thinking behind what he's done, because we still haven't got brand guidelines yet. But I find this process fascinating. I am going to go back and nag him about the strap line, because I'm sure he's come up with one. He just hasn't shared it with me.
Brilliant.
Ewen, anybody else? Any points for Ewen?
Ollie. Sorry.
Yeah, I really like the explanation, and I try to do this with my web clients, because I think it's a bit like when we were doing maths at school. It's like anyone can come up with an answer and copy it off someone, or same with the logo, you could download it off Shutterstock or whatever. But to actually show the thought process that's gone into it and how relevant that final product is and their brand is to the person, I think is just much more powerful than just kind of saying, here's 3 logos, what do you think? But to show this whole kind of process and go through it, I think is really powerful.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And the reason I personally I can't do it without going through this process is because I find the creative process very difficult, because it's so subjective. And the only way I can put a context on it is to go through that process. So if I'm challenged, I can go back and say, but this is where we came from, and this is what, this is why we've done this. Without that, you've got nothing, as you say, and you can go round and round in circles. So I find it a bit of protection for me personally, because I do struggle with the creative process as much as producing a better product. Andrew.
Yeah, just really, just a bit of an anecdote actually, picking up on what Ollie's just said. I remember a big lesson I learned when I was doing my foundation in art and design. You would obviously you would go through a project and then you would produce a final piece at the end of it. And more often than not, what would happen is you would muck around for God knows how long, and then go, oh, I've got to do that final piece. So you'd produce it, and because you knew what you were going to do, you'd produce it and be really pleased with it. And then, just to show your workings out, as Ollie's alluded to, you go and actually do the proper process, and then you come up with a better idea. So that was a big lesson to me. And this is exactly the same thing.
Nick, sorry.
Yeah, Ewen, can I just ask, what do you think about testing the concepts once you've actually seen them? I think you mentioned that Richard took them down the pub and obviously got a straw poll from some of his mates. That's great, isn't it? Because you get some independent perspectives. It's probably not particularly robust, but it's a variety of opinions that you can then consider before you make the final decision.
Yeah,
how far should you go?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one, because it is a really difficult one, because you're right. It's one of those, what the direction I gave to Richard was, by all means, show it to lots of people and get points of view. But remember, this is your decision and you've got to be comfortable with it. Because I think what I wanted to demonstrate on the call, and it didn't quite work, is that whenever you explain something and show a brand to someone, the nature of the beast is you will get lots of different responses, and none of them are wrong. Nobody's point of view is wrong. So the person who is A, controlling it from our point of view, and B, the client has to be very clear about what is it they want and what is it they want to do. So when I came back to Richard, I was going to do my utmost to try and direct him away from Poppy, but for the right reasons, not to change his mind. If he came through with a strong point, then I'd have to deal with it. So you have to be, it's just like everything, you just have to draw a fine line, and you have to let the person go through their own thought process to come up with what they want, because they're going to live with it. So they have to be able to live with it.
You right. But it's also true that once he's got that, or once any of us got a logo or a brand, is what you do with it, how you show it, the consistency, as Ollie said, matters, because you can have a great brand image, but if the right people don't see it often enough, then it's usually, I mean, I noticed from that particular page, there was somebody in the bottom right, can't remember their name, but it was just a type and a grey, and I thought he'd done it himself. Be interested to see whether he does any business. You would think he would be the first company to fall, but it depends how many are showing it, you know? Do you agree?
Mm-hmm. I think as well, remember that the brand is just, as we've always said, as part of the journey, Paul, with marketing crews, the brand is just the start of the story. Then it's how do you get in front of the audience and what you're saying. But hopefully what Richard will have now is he'll have not just a logo, but he'll have, from what he wants, this comes from within him. He's got that. As long as he sticks to what he's doing and his brand, he retains those things and they're true, and which I'm sure they are, then he's given himself that start.
For those of you who know Richard, and Rod, you and Kelly and I know him very well now. I've known him for many years. If you try and talk to him, I like the way you said you had a 2-hour conversation with him. I wonder what proportion he spoke and you didn't. But he is a bit of a butterfly. He's all over the place. So that is absolutely typical. Martin, you had a point.
Hi, yeah. No, I was just interested, Ewan, that you seem so against the poppy idea. What made you feel that you wanted to present it, rather than, because you had two very strong ideas, and then you're presenting this and thinking, oh my God, it's a nightmare and I don't like it, rather than just saying, actually, let's leave that on the...
Because he'd mentioned it in the original briefing that
okay.
That's the reason. It was one of those nightmares where, and I'm sure we've all had it from a creative process, where the client comes with an idea, and you think, I have to present it because it's the idea, because it's what the client had in their mind. But given the choice, I would have presented 2 and not 3.
Yeah. Okay.
Good. Marcus?
So in recent years, we've seen the rise of the personal brand, which used to be reserved for pop stars and film stars and the like. And it's become much more of a democratic process due to the internet. What are your thoughts, Ewan, on the personal brand and the company brand?
Deep question.
It is a bit deep. I did think whether I should ask it or not, but I'm asking.
No. Personally, from my point of view, I don't see any different. I think everything applies to everything. I think that if you change I don't think the building analogy still applies. You may change some of the words to be more personal words than company words rather than services. But I think beliefs and values, I think if we look at some of the personal brands around, I don't think there's any difference. Personally, I think it's exactly the same. You could apply the same process.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's because of the internet, it's because of social media that everybody's got a voice now. And obviously, in the old days, people towed the line. Now it's encouraged for people to have their own personality and express their own personalities within that company.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I think the same things apply. I think we can all look at some personal brands where they've built their brand on something, and then perhaps have used social media to say something that goes against their brand, and then look what happens. The brand falls a little bit. In some cases, it falls fairly spectacularly because they're going against that building diagram that they've built for themselves.
Yes, all goes the other way as well. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rod.
Yeah, all I was going to say was, I mean, obviously I've got a logo, I've got a strapline, I've got all those things as well. But if you go onto my website, I'm the first person you see. And if you go onto come up onto the market store, you're going to see the picture of the funeral director. I might be dressed in a scruffy pair of jeans and a t-shirt, but there's me when I'm fully dressed, you know. So it's because it is a very personal business. You know, they're dealing with a person, and it's the same with all of your businesses. It's you and them, and you've got to get across what it is that they want and produce the product that you're producing.
Yes.
So I take it very personally, and I make it very personal, if you see what I mean.
But the point that Marcus is making is that you could have launched Rod Major Funeral Services.
Yeah, the reason I didn't, Paul.
No, I realise that. I realise that.
I mean, if I just explain, it's just that if you go to Google right now and you type in Wells, oh, I need a funeral services in Wells, I'm going to come up. Funeral directors near me, I'll probably come up on there now, you know, because of lots of different reasons. But I just felt making it too personal on my name was not what it was about. It's about a funeral service, and then within the funeral service is about a person.
Ewan?
I would say a circle has no start.
Exactly.
So, you know, you're where you are, but the brand comes first, and you had to, you know, so it's a constant, you know, you're going round and round. You are where you are probably because of your brand, but your brand came because of you. So you're going, you know, you're going in a circle, and the circle's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more valuable.
Do you think that when we start out in business, in the back of our minds, we want to appear bigger than we think we are? So we'll think of a creative name or you know, describes what we do, etc. I found that in the hairdressing industry, there were all sorts of even funny ones, curl up and dye and fat boy trim and all sorts of things like that. But really, what happened is that the ones that went to the top in terms of money were the Nicky Clarks, Joshua Galvin, Vidal Sassoon. So is it that the creative people that have got that unique creativity that makes them and it's interesting, Marcus, Ahmed, Nick Cole, photography. Is it that if you're creative, then you should be maybe using your name as your brand?
I mean, what about Bumble and Bumble or Sebastian, you know, they're also big companies that aren't people's names.
Yeah. No, I agree.
It can work both ways, can't it? But you do see small companies where it's an individual using the word we rather than I, where they're potentially trying to make them sound bigger than they really are. Or I'm sure Anne-Marie's got a view on that in terms of the I and the we.
Such a hard one.
Well,
I have a view on lots of things. But, I personally use we when I'm talking about my company, rightly or wrongly, because exactly as the point has been made, it makes me sound like there's more than just, well, kind of there is more than me, but it just makes me feel like I'm a bit more bigger and important than I am.
And actually, you work with other people that you draw on, so it's not always just you, is it?
No, I've got a team, but it's not, you know, they're not all a beginner book team, but that we are a kind of team. But I don't know. I mean, if it was a branding thing and it's not the right thing to do, then obviously I would take that on board. But I just kind of, for me, the company is we, and I am I.
I think when you start a business, also we've got to remember that the majority of us started with either very little capital or very little capital that we want to risk because we're not sure it's going to work. So given that most people will only spend money on a website and nothing else, they won't consider marketing as an investment. They see it as a cost. It's not surprising people don't go through a branding exercise. But I think if you get to a certain stage and you want to take your business to another level, maybe that's the time to reappraise your brand. Certainly, with working with you and Kelly on with this with Emma, I'm certainly re-looking at the Marketing Crew brand because I mean, you know, I didn't have that professionally. It was off the internet or whatever, and I just liked the look of it. It didn't say much more. But so it shows that you can have something that costs next to nothing and you can still build it because your personality and the content builds it. But Anne-Marie, you started out saying that, you know, you've got the roof in. If you go back down again, what have you got from today?
Lots. And I think it was an absolutely brilliant, fantastic exercise. It's something that I would love to go through. And maybe we can have a one-to-one, Ewan, at some point and just chat through the options. But I think when Rod did his monologue, as Ewan put it, I could do the same about my business. So maybe I have got those bits in place, but I just haven't formalized it. So that's kind of my takeaway, I guess.
Yeah, Ewan?
And I would say, when the downloads come, have a look at them, and I reckon you would be able to take yourself through the process and fill in the gaps almost, because you know this is often done from people who don't know where they're starting from, and we have to tease it out from them. You do, so you might well find that actually, being that you're creatively minded, given the prompts, you might just be able to say, well, this is it, and I can build the diagram, and I now know that that's what my brand is. But you might well be able to.
But there still would be valuable, a great value in her speaking to somebody like yourself or somebody else, because who we think we are is tainted by lots of things, and other people see us differently. And you know, we take a lot of our qualities and our values for granted. And I think it's important to share that with somebody that can tease out even more. And, you know, because I see each one of you, and I have, even in the short time I've known various people, you come over with different values, good values. We don't have any nasty people on here. We've got people that are, you know, are willing to share. So they're good values as far as I'm concerned. Martin, do you want to just say what you're saying and then what you've got from today?
Yeah, sure. No, I was just going to say that before COVID, I used to go to this West of England Design Forum talks, and they had a big London company called Ragged Edge and a client on the stage. And the client was setting up this product, and his view was that he didn't want to start his brand and his vision and then have to rebrand further down the line. It was all about the process of getting everything right to begin with before then rolling out what he was doing. So I think, like Ewan saying, it's a really important process, and to get it right at the beginning, again, if you can afford it. For today, I loved it. I love seeing a great design process in action and a branding process, you know, from the beginning. I love the the mood boards and the explanation of each logo. You know, like Ewan said, it gives you strength when you're presenting. So I think that's it's just great to see that today. Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Martin. I'm just going to continue around the table. Debbie. You've got two brands, I suppose, so that's always the dilemma, isn't it, when we've got fingers in different pies. That's why I have a website called paulclegg.uk, based on what Marcus was saying earlier. So what's your feelings? You've got two brands. What did you get? What did you get from today?
I've got to say, every time I come on these meetings, I just feel like a sponge, just taking everything in. It's so interesting. Branding, I mean, it's something that I guess I've obviously thought about and never even thought to the extent of what I've learned today. I've got two completely different businesses, really, which, you know, one's singing and one's therapy, which actually theoretically are quite similar, but not. I mean, all I want to do really is go off now and do it on myself and sort of come up with some kind of branding, because I don't think I've ever really properly done it. Thank you so much for today. I'm going to go off and do some homework.
Good.
Basically.
Thank you, Debbie. And there's nothing at all wrong with having two businesses. Perhaps perhaps I suspect that I know where your real love lies, but you've got to balance income and what have you. So, but I might be wrong on that. You see, Marcus.
Oh, gosh, I love branding. It's my whole life has been interested. I've been interested in branding. So yeah, this has really resonated. But at the end of the day, like you said, Paul, without sales and without marketing, having a brand on its own is not enough, sadly. So yeah, there is that side to it. But yeah, I really enjoyed today. I just love branding.
You get paid more with what you're worth when you've got a brand. Mel.
Yeah, I mean, like you, and I've been involved in branding over the years for big companies and small companies, and it was good to see. And I've probably a refresher course on the branding process, and I agree with you in that it was good to see great creative work and so well presented, because I've not seen that an awful lot over the years. It was good. I appreciate it. So thanks, Ewan.
Good, thank you, Mel. I have to get you leading a session on direct mail or whatever. That would be good. Rod.
Yeah, I thought it was very, very good. Well done, Ewan. And it's interesting how we forget how much we've done, and as you say, that circle keeps getting bigger and bigger. And sometimes it's a mystery. Sometimes you realise that you only get out what you put in out of life. I remember saying to my children, "Remember, life's like a bank. Don't try and draw out what you haven't paid in."
Andy, we started with you. Anything else to add?
No, I don't think so, really. Really, really valuable session. So thank you, Ewan. And I think this idea that you've now come up with, Paul, of kind of pulling everybody's expertise into these kind of sessions is fantastic, because we can all learn so much from each other. So brilliant. Thank you.
Andrew.
Yeah, really good presentation. Thank you very much, Ewan. And yeah, I just think these types of exercises are great because they keep you honest. We can go off, get a bit of cold face, and you sort of pushing forward, but sometimes you can lose sight of something. So to go back and use that as a touch point, I think is really valuable. Actually, keep you on track.
Yeah, because if you don't, something's incongruent, and the person, the audience doesn't quite know what it is, but it becomes incongruent. Andy.
Brilliant presentation, Ewan. Like I said, input from yourself and Martin leads me to think that when I started up and went through the process, a lot of people said, "Why are you doing that so early on?" The reason was, as Martin said, I wanted something that was going to stay with me all the way through and can allow minor tweaks without losing the essence of what it is. So yeah, wonderful, yeah, to see again, and it is worthwhile. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Andy. Nathan, I know you struggle with your internet today, but
yeah, I think I'm back in the room now. Yeah, good stuff, Ewan. That was really helpful. And I guess for me, it's quite interesting the thought process behind the logo and the whole branding toolkit, because doing what I do, I see a lot of branding toolkits of various degrees of quality, but that one was superb, and it's just really nice to sort of, yeah, just get the explanation behind why that color or why that image.
You've gone. Gonna move on to the
under the hood look.
Thanks, Nathan. Nick.
We've all heard the quote, haven't we? Your brand is more than your logo. I think Ewan illustrated brilliantly today why your brand is more than your logo, and why your logo is part of your brand. And I think just going through that process and seeing the different polarizing directions and understanding why some were accepted, why some were rejected, linking it back to the personality as well. I thought it was fantastic. And I'm sure there are agencies that would charge you thousands of pounds for what we've heard today. It was such a concise way of understanding what branding is. So thank you, Ewan. Really enjoyed it.
And I think that's just a very quick hint. I think that's an interesting point. You don't have to spend thousands. This was done under funeral marketing, and it doesn't have to be thousands. If it comes down to the process, and if the people you're employing are good enough at it, you can do it for less than a lot of big agencies charge. Obviously they have the overhead, so it's more difficult, but it doesn't have to cost a fortune.
But you really simplified the theory, Ewan, which I think is
Yeah.
Why we're here. So thank you.
Rebecca.
Yeah, I'd echo that, definitely. What you've all said, really, just how useful that was. And yeah, I've definitely made some notes and will look at mine much more, because I've realized my logo is very, I don't know, it's just like a filler, really. It's not really doing anything or adding much. So something to look at and how that fits into the whole branding. But also I think how when you go through the branding like you did, how that can feed into marketing stories. So when I'm talking to businesses, getting them to realize that the photos and the marketing nuggets they put out, that should all be reflecting back on their brand, which a lot of small practices that I deal with don't do. That it's always very dry, not very interesting things, when actually you look at what they've tried to do with their branding on their website and there's way more there they can be exploiting. So yeah, it's great. Yeah, really useful.
Good. Thanks. Rebecca. Chris.
Yeah, I very much enjoyed today. I mean, I really like the stuff that Ewan's been presenting today, and I have to say I've really enjoyed working so far with Ewan, with Nick, and with Andrew, because all of them have flavoured a lot about my own understanding of branding, of what I'm projecting out, and what I want the world to understand about my business and my process. Yeah, I'm looking forward to what people take from this and seeing kingfishers and butterflies appearing everywhere.
Thanks, Chris. Ollie.
Yeah, thanks, Ewan. That was brilliant, really good. My eyes have been drawn all through this to Andy's t-shirt, and is a great example of, I'm not into Marvel films particularly, but a great example of a logo, but of a brand. We all kind of know what Marvel are and what they kind of stand for, you know, even with just him there sort of logo on his t-shirt. But yeah, the main thing I got out of that was yeah, the difference between the logo and the brand. I kind of really get that now, and thinking about the ways I'm going to take that forward and introduce more of the brand, I guess, because I'm very guilty of that we, you know, rather than I on my kind of website. But I'm thinking kind of on social media, and I send out proposals to people, and to kind of just introduce more personal elements that kind of represent, you know, my beliefs, values, the capabilities, the skills, all the things Ewan sort of spoke about in those slides, and kind of just introducing those a bit more and just giving it more of a personality rather than, you know, this is what I do, these are the prices, these are the time scales kind of thing. So yeah, that's definitely what I kind of got from it all. So thank you, Ewan.
Ollie, that fits beautifully in what I just wanted to add to that, which was each one of you, each one of us is far more than what we do. And I think and I certainly will go back through that document. They'll be up this afternoon and I'll send you the links to them. Is going through that document, perhaps everybody should go through that when they start business, because we are more than what we do. And if we focus more on that, we are talking more about the value we bring rather than just what we do, sounding like everybody else that does what we do. I'd like to give a big thank you to you, and I think that was brilliantly done and excellent today. Well done, Ewan. And I know I was rather nervous over the weekend because he's had a really bad back problem and wasn't sure whether he could hold on. And I thought, goodness me, I'm going to have to do this. And I couldn't do it anywhere near as well as you. And thanks very much. Thanks to everybody, and see you all next week. Have a great one.
Thanks, Paul.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
Have a good week, everyone.